Hey everyone, Cool Kid here, and welcome back to Accolade Acquisitions, a supplementary series I'm doing showing how to get each Accolade glyph against the Fragmented One. I've been really looking forward to this episode because our final glyph is for Jade, who I think is the most fun of any Accolade glyph. Because of Glory on High, you're able to fight this boss in a very different way than every other Accolade glyph, and I think it's super fun. So, the build we're using is actually going to be the build I normally use. This has some intricacies that aren't really super worth going into. I play around both the alt fire and primary fire of Glory, so I'm not really built super hard into either direction. If you want, you can build into specifically the primary fire for this, but I have some room left open for the alt fire because I think it's good for dealing with the fragmented tide and stuff like that. So, Archon Vitality for double heat procs. Archon Intensify is fairly easy to activate on Jade. Growing Power for strength. Corrosive Projection's good to have just generally, but you can swap this out for something else if you want. It's not particularly helpful in this fight. A little bit of range. We've got Streamline, Adaptation, Transient Fortitude, and then some Duration and Energy Maximum. Hotshot makes its return from the Protea video, as it's very easy to build up on Jade, and Arcane Impetus is just generally really good for frames that have a secondary Exalted, and I'll show why in a moment. We have 4 oranges with secondary crit chance, and then we also have a cast speed shard. So as opposed to any of our regular weapons, we're actually going to be relying on Glory pretty much exclusively. And the reason Impetus is so good on frames like Jade, as well as, Dante and Mesa and the like, is secondary Encumber. So because Encumber can give you a random status effect, it's able to build up stacks of Impetus all the way up to 13, which is basically its cap. You can technically go higher with Void and Tau procs under specific circumstances, but for our purposes, 13 is the cap. So, we've got some crit chance, we've got our heat damage, Magnetic Might is here for the crit damage primarily. You could also probably put like an Elementalist here if you wanted to, Multi-Shot for the primary fire, and then Galvanized Shot for the base damage and the status chance. The base damage isn't super necessary because of Symphony of Mercy. The damage bonus from this is base damage, so that's something worth keeping in mind. So, when it comes to kind of the strategy, Jade's 1 is super good for clearing out groups of ads by marking them, healing herself, spreading just general damage and crowd control for the enemies that will spawn throughout the fight. The 2 is very good for its damage bonus, its strength bonus, and even the shield recharge delay if you think that you're, under threat of dying. Ophanum Eyes doesn't really do a ton in terms of its armor strip in this fight, but it's useful against the Culverins and stuff in the lead up to the fight, and it can also slow the Fragmented Tide as well. It also has the benefit of, if you want to use a Beast Companion, it's very easy to revive them with Ophanum Eyes, which just makes it a lot more convenient than the typical process of, reviving a Beast Companion. And then, like I said, we're going to focus primarily on Glory on High for our damage. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I think it's a very fun way to approach the fight. Also, Zeneric is here because I don't want to rely on Vazarin for this series. If you want, you can swap it out for like Matter Eye or something, but I've kind of been sticking it out even if I don't really need it, because I feel like it's a nice little baseline. So, for our companion, we've got Worm. Reinforced Bond is especially helpful with this strat, as is Tenacious Bond, so we've got both of those going, and then Guardian's helpful, as well as Negate as just kind of layers of protection, and then Primed Regen to get our Sentinel back as quickly as possible. And then we're using Prime Laser Rifle for the critical chance bonus to cross the threshold for Tenacious Bond. So, like I said, we're going to be doing this fight pretty much entirely in Glory. I know that that's a pretty weird way to do it, and like I said, you don't have to, but I think it's a very fun way to approach the fight. It lets Jade think very differently about how she has to dodge a lot of the boss's attacks, and I think that's super fun. So, that's all for the setup. I'll see you in the boss fight. Okay. You'll probably notice that I'm already in Glory at the moment. That's just because I have like my conditionals like Impetus and Archon Intensify and all that stuff. So I try to like get all of that stuff organized as early as possible, like, entering Glory, getting my Impetus stacks up and all that like stuff activated, and then dipping out of it and back into it to activate it with all the conditionals. It's honestly kind of annoying, but it's not terrible. I also have on Emergence Dissipate. I didn't mention this earlier, but I think it's very good for Exalted frames, especially Jade. because she is kind of energy hungry, even though I currently have, I think, the minimum amount of drain on Glory at 1.25 seconds with my current stats, which Impetus helps a lot, to be fair. It gives me 39% efficiency. But because Jade is fairly energy hungry, I really like Dissipate on her, and it's helpful for, like, you know, an Excalibur or what have you as well, if you'd like. Alright, so yeah, this isn't going to be, like, any crazy damage in terms of how fast we're, like, laying it on. But like I said, I think that the fun of this comes less from, like, being super efficient, and more from just having to dodge things in, like, a very different way than normal. Sure, flying lets me dodge stuff like this, but when you get into, like, the arm slam, then you've got some, like, intrigue there, and, like, yeah, being able to dodge it that way. And once we get to the second phase and we're dealing with certain attacks, like you've got your Ex-Oblivion and stuff, or Unholy Ground, like a lot of the Phase 2 attacks, that stuff gets really interesting. Yeah, I can just, like, avoid a lot of this stuff in the first phase, especially by being up here, but there's some cool stuff a little later into the fight. You know what, I swear. I wasn't quite fast enough to drag it over him there. I don't believe I can hit the weak spots with this, because I believe it's, like, radial damage. You know, now that I think of it, I don't really think that Galvanized shot is doing a ton for me. Ooh, the predictive aim got me there. I realized basically as soon as I had gone for it that it was going to start tracking because I did it too early. Well, I'm going to have a weaker Glory for the rest of this fight, probably. That's not a huge deal. Like I said, I'm going to use Dissipate to recover that, and then my Worm should come back. Yeah, this is a really interesting attack to dodge, because the Sparks do have tracking, so it's really interesting to try and, like, work your way through them. I quite like it, honestly. I think it's a very fun experience to try and dodge Ex-Oblivion while in Glory on high. But yeah, a lot of the attacks can be avoided just by sitting up here, but then you've got... Oh, so there's a bug on Jade where sometimes you can't dodge, and I was relying on my dodge to avoid that attack, and yeah, you can probably piece together from there what just happened. I'm a little annoyed that that bug still exists, but yeah, sometimes you lose your ability to dodge. I think entering Operator fixes it, but... Okay, this attack is a little weird about when it nullifies you, so I'm kind of just gonna leave it alone, I think. Yeah, this is definitely on the slower side, but like I said, I think that this is a more fun way to approach the fight. That's really the main reason I'm doing it with Glory. You don't really have to worry about this too much. And with the Tide spawning, I really don't have to worry about my conditionals and stuff too much either. There are only a few attacks that can threaten me up here. Okay, I'm not sure if my dodge is going to work. Okay, I tried to specifically, like, bait out the predictive aim on there. And then, yeah, when the boss is, like, surrounded by minions, you can detonate them, and that'll deal a good chunk of damage to the boss as well. I have to be very mindful of the sparks. I think I'm just going to kind of go in, like a clockwise rotation to try and dodge them. Seems to work fairly well. Okay, this attack, I didn't expect to be that threatening, but the plumes of fire can actually reach high enough that they can hit you in the feet. So it's good to be careful, good to remain aware. I don't really need the armor strip from my 3. I'm mostly casting it out of habit, honestly, but it also does slow the Tide, which can be useful. I don't know if that's gonna... Okay, that did hit him. Not the fastest run, but like I said, I think it's a lot of fun to do that, just in terms of, like, yeah, not only is it that you can avoid a lot of the attacks, but when you get to stuff like Lash of Limbs and Ex-Oblivion and all that, I think it is fun to work around the unique situation you find yourself in when it comes to dodging them. Okay. Man, this is the 24th episode of this series, now that we're finally wrapping it up. I'm not gonna lie to you all, I'm really relieved that this is gonna be the last one for a while. Like, knowing my luck, DE is gonna release a super boss in Jade Shadow's Constellations, which isn't out at the time that I'm recording this, and I'm gonna have to blow my shit smooth off, but these videos take a long time to make, so I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty relieved that this is the last one I have to do. So yeah, that's the completed run on Jade. Like I said, that was more focusing on the fun of using Glory over efficiency. You can use the other strats or other weapons you've seen throughout this series if you want. I just wanted to showcase the unique situation that Jade could leverage. So yeah, that's the run. Let me know in the comments if you thought it was helpful, and considering the series is over now, thank you for watching.